Strap on your straw hats and put your wooden legs away, because today we are diving headfirst into the mouth of the sea god, a giant kaiju-sized Lovecraftian force of nature that grabbed a hold of the hearts of all Berserk fans with its many tentacles. Speaking of which, if you would like to feel my slimy, long tentacles shoved up your backside until you are assimilated as a part of me, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way we will become one and you will be immediately updated and see any new video posted, and it'll keep you up to date on plenty of Berserk manga and other such content. You'll be much more fulfilled with your life, and about 17% more handsome. When it comes to mythology involving the oceans and the seven seas, there are countless stories and legends involving sea monsters, and much of which were brought on by a culmination of mankind's fear of the unknown when it comes to the ocean depths, covering most of the world and going so deep that we are unable to explore the very bottom of what could possibly be lurking below. Many sailors would say to be wary of looking into the vastness of the ocean, especially at night, as you may be pulled in by its allure and its mystical power. Fear and respect sometimes go hand in hand, but you can't blame human beings, especially back in the day, when we weren't even sure how long the ocean went on for, if the world was flat, or anything that could be lurking within it. And as far as the sea god of Berserk is concerned, it may be that Miura combined a few different mythologies together in order to create his creature. The design for at least the tentacle portions of the sea god seem to be reminiscent of the Kraken, which is generally described and depicted as an enormous squid. And I can't help but notice how the mouth openings of the tentacles look almost identical to how the Kraken was portrayed in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which did come out shortly before these chapters, though they may have nothing to do with one another. But one thing for sure that probably influenced the sea god were the stories of Cthulhu from H.P. Lovecraft, specifically the story The Shadow over Innsmouth, a story that I admittedly have not read, but from what I gathered from the summaries, there are similarities involving the characters encountering a strange and horrific town that is similar to the town on the island where the sea god in Berserk is introduced. But most people have an awareness of Cthulhu, or have at least seen its design before, as it's pretty prevalent in pop culture. An ancient, gigantic creature from the sea that could spawn an apocalyptic outcome, much like the sea god from Berserk. The sea god itself is never fully seen in the manga, as most of it is still underwater, but it rivals Ganishka's Shiva form as the largest creature that we have seen in the manga thus far. It's not really confirmed which of the two is larger. Ganishka stood on land with his head reaching into the clouds, and the sea god at least has a mouth and a head that practically take up the entire size of a small island and absolutely dwarfs Roderick's warship. Along with it being gigantic and its mouth being a line of sharp, rigid teeth, it has hundreds of tentacles that it uses to stretch far within the ocean, able to touch areas far away from where its stationary body is. See, the lore of the sea god mentioned in the series links it to one island in particular that kind of became like its holding cell. Like the power of all monsters and astral creatures, it's highly responsive to humanity's belief in fear in said creature. Assumingly 1,000 years ago or so, astral creatures existed alongside mankind a lot more prevalently than they do in the present storyline. The sea god was essentially imprisoned underneath this island with the help of the Marrows. I'll get to them in a moment. But as the creature lay dormant, it would awaken on occasion due to situations like the full moon, which enhance astral creatures' energy, so to speak. So it kind of became like a god to the local inhabitants of the island. So it's not a literal god, not in the sense of the god hand or anything above them in the Berserk lore. The word god is sort of how people viewed it, and it does seem to be the largest and most powerful ocean entity that we know to exist. The problem came when the physical and astral worlds merged together, because this caused the sea god to fully awaken and start consuming all that was around it, meaning pretty much the inhabitants of the entire island. We might not know the full extent of the sea god's ability, but first and foremost is that its sheer size gives it an incredible amount of physical strength and durability, able to rip itself out of the side of an island upon awakening. But its most unique ability has everything to do with its tentacles. Now, I know you might know a lot of anime or manga with good tentacle scenes, but I don't know if any of them quite do something like the sea god does. So the tentacles can branch out seemingly as far as the sea god wills it to be. It can also use them to attack, and the tentacles themselves have mouths of their own that are able to devour whatever it wants. So each tentacle is like a creature in itself that you would have to fight and avoid getting consumed by. Once you are devoured by the sea god, it can actually assimilate you into being a part of itself, meaning that it can use you as a mindless puppet, such as it did with the inhabitants of the island that it was trapped in, acting as stationary silhouettes or even using them to attack, and even still being capable of speech. In fact, the assimilation through the tentacles can actually have you retain your own sense of self. Bonebeard and his entire pirate crew, which were super annoying, were attacked and then used as weapons as the sea god, though with still fully functioning annoying personalities. So once you're devoured or eaten, you are actually reborn, sort of fused into the creature itself. You become a part of it, like you are fused to its body, and you become a servant of its will. Despite perhaps maintaining your own personality, you are still doing everything the sea god wants, and for the benefit of the sea god. I guess you could kind of look at this similarly as how pseudo-apostles are made. Check my video on them if you don't know, link should be in the description below, but apostles can sort of make servants or slaves that they can control of other people. The sea god here, though not an apostle, and just its own being, is still able to create these servants, but they are literally attached to him at the end of its tentacles. The sea god can even stretch itself inside of ships and use them as weapons as well, being able to control it from the inside with the entire crew that it had devoured. Fighting and killing the sea god is an extremely difficult process. It might not have seemingly limitless abilities like the god hand, but physically there's pretty much nothing you can do. Swords, cannons, and anything else made by man in the physical world are not strong enough to penetrate it due to the creature's size, and it probably would not even feel it if you tried to attack. Attacking the tentacles individually is possible, they can be sliced or hacked off, but there's always dozens more of where they came from. So you really aren't doing any prominent damage to the creature itself, and mostly you're just going to exhaust yourself. Magic, however, can at least keep the tentacles at bay. It seems as though, being a more blatantly evil creature, that it cannot enter an area that's been covered with a magical barrier by a witch. But of course the barrier itself must be maintained, requiring intense focus and concentration. The main weakness for the sea god to be exploited comes in the form of other astral creatures living in the ocean, in the form of Meros. Meros, which I also did a video on, you can check out in the description below as well, are on the more positive spectrum of astral beings in the Berserk universe, and they battle through sound, actually gathering together in large groups and singing in unison. This creates vibrations that actually are able to stun and paralyze the sea god to an extent. So even this cannot outright kill it, but the Meros are kind of acting as guardians of the sea, and were the ones responsible for imprisoning it to the island to begin with. To actually kill it, you would have to be as batshit crazy as Guts himself, who decided to actually go inside the creature's body through its mouth and try to cut its way to its heart. Within the sea god, there are also plenty of dangers, though not a part of the sea god like the tentacles are. There are still a plethora of smaller creatures living inside it that are like parasites that attacks anything left alive that winds up in the monster's stomach. There's an assortment of different kinds of eel-like creatures, bugs, other sea-dwelling animals. It's pretty insane. And though Guts thought the heart was the best place to strike, which it probably was, he wasn't expecting the vibrations of the heart itself, its size being about 2 stories, to be as penetrating as it was. The shaking and rattling of the massive heartbeat caused Guts to be practically immobile, even though he is well beyond the average man in terms of strength, and had the enhancement of the Berserker armor, which more or less numbs all your senses of pain and allows you to go beyond your limits and fight at your maximum potential. Even with all of this, the intensity of the heartbeat itself kept Guts at bay. It wasn't until the combination of the Meros singing and the indomitable will of Guts' drive to stay alive that allowed him to be able to stand and slash the monster's heart. So, needless to say, fighting the sea god requires multiple factions all doing their part as efficiently as possible, otherwise you're just gonna die, or become a tentacle man. The sea god segment of the story is met with some criticism by fans, saying that it drags on too long and takes away from the main storyline. Other fans love its inclusion and how it opens Berserk's world of Fantasia and incorporates much more fantasy elements. Let me know what you guys think about the sea god segment down below, and how its mythology adds to Berserk's universe. And keep in mind, we still don't know the full extent of the Astroworld merger and what it unleashed upon the world of Berserk. If this was the god of the sea, or sort of a representation of such, could there also be giant sky monsters, a sky god, or a mountain god, or something like that and beyond? I don't know, it's some crazy stuff to consider. Anyways, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching these videos. I really do appreciate the support. I appreciate you guys enjoying them. Go ahead and give it a like if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below about the sea god or whatever else you want to mention in this video. Check out the playlist of the monster manuals themselves as I kind of break down all the Berserk creatures and all the kind of crazy stuff they can do. Consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next time.